this is for the one who ain't never had a love, yeah. This one's for the girl who don't feel like she's enough, yeah. Yeah, yeah, yeah. This one's for the cool kid playing on the school team, crying to himself cause he never had the prom queen. Head full of wants, but they said it's just a pipe dream, yeah. This one's for the kids like me, they never had one thing. The ladies always turn their cheek, but they ain't let the fat ones sing. This one's for the kids like me, kept working when they had nothing. When people try to take their dreams, they stuck it to them, please don't change.
What's going on, everybody? Welcome to the Alex Cuesta Show. How's everybody doing out there on this Wednesday, March 12th, 2025? We have episode 156 coming at you, and this is my solo week without David. He is off continuing to do more of his transition into turning into Davina. Obviously, I'm kidding. He is working. He's probably listening at some point at work right now, and he will yell at me for always talking about his very private matters, but no, Dave will be back next week as always, and maybe he'll pop in this week if we do a random show. But we are here. We're ready to have some fun. As always, before we get to the fun stuff, make sure you like, share, follow, subscribe, 5-star rating on the podcast. And we always appreciate wherever you're watching this, whether it is Rumble, Kick, YouTube, Facebook, X. Hello to everybody. Thank you. And again, if you're listening via podcast form, hi as well. Make sure you look for us on all the social medias at the Alex Cuesta Show. You can find us there and go do your due diligence. Last week, we had a fun show. We talked to Kevin Posobiec of Human Events Daily, co-host over there, and we had an absolute blast talking to Kevin. He's a good dude. We just talked about all the stuff going on with Trump and some foreign affairs things. So 100% recommend go back giving that a listen. But I want to jump right into it this week, because I'm actually pumped for this guest as well. He's an individual, like many of them that I do, I just kind of randomly message and shot in the dark, because he's someone that I've heard talk on other shows before, been a fan of his for a little while. And when he agreed to come on, it was kind of like, I don't fanboy really very often. I've been doing this for a little while, but I like kind of texted David right away and I was like, he agreed. So I was pumped to have him on. We're going to bring him in right now. He is Spencer Klavan. He is the associate editor of the Claremont Review of Books and author of Light of the Mind, Light of the World, Illuminating Science Through Faith. Spencer, what's up, man?
Alex, so great to be here. And that was such a nice intro. I feel bad that I have to just air you out right now, because what the fuck was that intro music? I need a full detailed rundown. Was that Simple Plan? What just happened to me?
That is actually one of mine and my brother's good friends. Grew up with him. His name is Hack No Cap, and he's been on the show a bunch of times, and he does a whole bunch of everything. He does pop punk, he does hip hop, and yeah, that's him. That's Hack No Cap.
Because high school Spencer, there is a place in my heart, a sizable room in my heart, where the teenage boy who grew up listening to exactly that music like still lives. And I was just like
maybe 3-4 years ago.
Yeah.
And he has a whole. So Hack is one of the people I'm really trying to get out to the forefront.
Nice.
I love him like a brother. I think he's incredibly talented. And the crazy thing with him is he's alone. He's in it. He's in there. He's doing the most he does is he'll look for some producers to potentially help get the beats. Sometimes he makes his own. Yeah. But once he gets them, he mixes, he masters, he does all the vocals, all the overlays, everything on his own. And he has at least 4 or 5 projects out on Spotify, anywhere you can find it. And he's incredibly talented and dedicated.
That's insane. People are so talented, honestly. Yeah. I don't know, like, why anyone ever wants to talk to. Like, there are people out there that are doing the most insane. That's incredible. Anyway, I had to talk about it because
crazy thing is he has no formal vocal lessons either. None.
Oh,
no
so it's
formal
his voice
anything.
Too, wow.
Just him. He decides. So the funny thing is, and I'm going to air it out. We've talked about this. It was a joke when he was in college that he wants to be a rapper. it was a joke that he wants to do that and everything. And like John Cena was popular and stuff like that. So
Yeah.
it was like a joke that he wanted to do that. And
Nice.
then he got serious. And here we are, probably, man, he has to have damn near he has like 60 songs, 40, like somethings, 50, 60 songs that are out
Wow.
there.
Wow.
And I mean, I hope someone finds him. I hope some label decides to grab him because they won't regret it.
I'm
So
out here in Nashville, there's people all over the place. Literally everybody. I used to live in LA and it was this big industry town,
yeah,
and every waiter and waitress wanted to be an actor or an actress.
it
And
happens. Yeah.
now I go to the gym and I'm like striking up a conversation. What do you do? It's like, oh, I'm a songwriter. Oh, I'm like everyone is getting into the music industry. It's kind
Well,
of fun actually. When people ask me what I do, I usually say I'm a writer,
mhm.
and everyone then immediately assumes I mean like I write country music lyrics basically for like it's like, oh, who do you work for? But it's actually super fun to be on the outside of the industry when you live in an industry town, to be sort
Yeah,
of like
that's cool.
you can just be the cheerleader.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I will say this, if you listen to any of his music and you like it, talk to me. I will send you the raws. He will absolutely let you use it.
Really?
He
Oh,
will let you
interesting.
use it
Okay.
for like pre-rolls or anything. He
Yeah.
will 100% give you royalties because he just wants to be out there more and more.
Wow.
So
Wow.
if you
All
like
right.
anything,
Cool.
we'll talk. We'll connect you. But
Sounds great.
talk more here because, like I said, I am pumped to have you on. I told you before the show, I was listening, and people know I listen to other podcasts. I know I think it's kind of like a weird stigma. I don't know if I'm doing it wrong. I don't know if you're supposed to mention other shows. I don't care. I mention other shows that I like
Yeah,
all the time.
for sure.
I like listening to Tim Cass. I listen to Glenn Beck a good amount, and a bunch of people from the Blaze, and listening to Glenn Beck, and he starts going into this diatribe about like the next guy he's going to talk to is someone you'll be familiar with. I've been a fan of his father's, blah blah blah, and going in, and then he's like, you'll recognize the last name. And then we're going to do is he did his typical 60-second break, right? Because if you're listening to the Glenn Beck program, it's famous for the 60-second break
Yeah.
all the radio shows. And then all of a sudden, boom, it's Spencer Klavan. And I'm like, Klavan? And he's like, yes, it's that Klavan. Like he knew what we were thinking.
Yeah,
And
yeah, yeah.
really cool. And I heard you there. And I think that's when this book first came out that I heard, and you were kind of talking about the book. So, again, like I said, it's always fun when I can poach guests from the biggest conservative talk host in the
It
country.
it is funny that stigma. Like, I feel like it's cool to be a podcast host who says, "Oh, I don't actually listen to any podcasts." It's so crazy. I do a podcast, but I don't listen to podcasts.
I
I hear
listen
that
to
all
a
the time.
ton.
I'm an addict, bro. I like it. I have this whole like roundup of shows, and what's fun is like that's where I get the most dissenting and differing views because I
Oh
tend to
yeah.
live kind of in conservative world. And the reading that I do for work is mostly pretty dry academic, so it's not political one way or another. But I listen to like the Slate podcasts a lot. I listen to a lot of like really let Pod Save America, and it's
The day I used to
yeah,
listen to the daily. I
yeah,
can't do the whispering anymore. I don't mind the content. I'm not gonna lie. Like sometimes the daily
sure,
has some really good stories.
sure.
But it's just like they're coming in there and it's like, and you'll be really, really interested. And it's like, bro, you don't sound smarter because you whisper. All right. Like
It's
get a British accent if you want to sound smarter. Like I
I
hate
tried
that. Like
that once. Yeah, it didn't go okay, but yeah. But
so it is really, and
have
I'm
you
the same
seen the
way.
like parody of NPR on Saturday Night Live where it's just two like cardigan wearing lesbians
Just
basically? I'm not
whisper.
sure if that's actually what it's supposed to be. It's like, and now on NPR, you might say it's time for a little bit of a foray into it's like
Oh, the false elitism that they have on NPR. It's like,
yeah.
yeah, that's. But I listen to shit. Like I said, I listen to the podcast too. I enjoy it. But like right now, I'm like almost going through withdrawal because I took the time to listen to an audiobook instead.
Wow.
Whoa! But it's a
What'd you
good one
listen
that I
to?
recommend.
Yes. What is it?
The Anxious Generation by Jonathan Haidt. Um,
Definitely.
it, it's fantastic. And Jonathan Haidt's, he is interesting because, I read The Righteous Mind, and
Hmm.
he's as independent as you're going to find in a lot of ways
Yeah.
because I think in a lot of ways morally he does lean right, but he does have some of his proclivities on the left too, and he's kind of he's an open atheist, so it's like he's just a good researcher,
Yeah.
a very seems like a very reasonable man.
Yeah.
I never met him, but I actually did reach out to him to try and get him on an interview, and his assistant's like, yeah, he's super busy. And I'm like, cool,
Yeah.
that's
Fair
okay.
enough. Fair
But
enough.
yeah, so I've been reading that book, and I have two
Cool.
young girls, so it's like that book is really prevalent to me to
Yeah.
try and like help shape their future and stuff like that. But I want to jump into the fun stuff because that's kind of a good segue with Jonathan Haidt
Yes,
being an
indeed.
atheist, because now we're going to talk about religion and in America. You have your day job, which is a lot, cooler than mine, I think. But I am a driving instructor. So I talk to a lot of adolescents coming to get their license and things like that. And I think that what we're going to talk about with religion in America is pretty prevalent because I talk to a lot of kids and it is really, I was expecting to hear a lot more narcissism and a
Yeah.
lot more pushing away from religion. And what I'm finding is there's a lot more kids that are at least curious about it and willing to talk about the topic. So,
Wow.
do you see in your work and things that you're looking at any sort of a trend that America's starting to re-embrace religion?
Well, I absolutely do, or at least I see the stirrings, the beginnings of a trend. Out of curiosity, before I ramble about this a little bit, where are you based?
I'm in
What's
Poughkeepsie, New York.
in New York? Okay, so not exactly a deep red, not a place where there's like a thick
See,
religious
it's
culture necessarily.
weird
Okay,
because if you're away from the cities, it is pretty red.
it's like
It
California. Okay,
it's very much like if you're not Albany, Buffalo, New York City, but like if you go on a Long Island is deep red in New York, like deep, deep, deep red.
interesting,
And then where
interesting.
I am in Dutchess, like we have a few cities by us, but the non-cities are you see Trump signs everywhere. It
See,
is very red at
this
some
this
points.
is why the Bible, one of the most ancient warnings, spiritual warnings, is against cities. The Bible, people sleep on this because they get into like there are obviously lots of things in the Bible about morality and so forth. But one thing the Bible, especially the Hebrew Bible, is obsessed with is when people start to get together in cities, they get all these crazy ideas. They're like, let's build a tower into heaven. Like there's just a very anti-city vibe, and I feel like coming from California, you drive up not that far from LA and suddenly people are sane again. Something about cities deranges people. But to return to the question of religion, I feel like, and this is really very impressionistic at this point because it's so early,
Yeah.
but I get the impression that a lot of trends that have been going on for my entire life are starting to reverse. And it's genuinely at the level of like an inflection point. If you remember in calculus in high school, you used to zoom in on the curve, and it
Yeah.
was like this very very tiny section, and you get smaller and smaller and smaller. But I just feel like we're at that moment where the acceleration has reversed
If you don't
direction.
mind me asking, how old are you, Spencer?
I'm 34.
Oh, so we're right around the same area. I'm going to be 37 in November. So we're not
Right.
too, we would have been in high school together.
Well, so you're probably like we probably grew up in exactly the same environment, and I bet we had the same kinds of friends. I've been saying that like my buddies and I in high school were Reddit bro atheists before there was Reddit. It's like if Reddit had existed, we would totally have been on it all the time and like reading and scrolling and posting. And it wasn't. So instead, we like holed ourselves up in the library and we did calculus problems. And like that was our, we never stood a chance, obviously, like with
Do you
with
remember
friends. Yeah.
basically the original shit posting was going on MySpaces and just ripping each other for
Yes,
comment to comment to comment. And that's
I
all it
sure
was. And it
do.
was like all the guys, like you knew you were a friend group when you were saying the most vile stuff to each other on MySpace. Like just, and that's what it was. And that
Yeah.
was, and so I was a bizarre case in high school
Okay.
because I was an athlete. I played football, ran track, but I
Yeah.
didn't just hang out with the jocks. Like I was friends with all them, but I also ran some cross country and I was a distance guy. So I was friends with all the AP nerds because distance guys are
Yep.
AP honors nerds. But
Yep.
then like I hung out with the kids that smoked a ton of pot too. Like I kind of
Interesting.
floated
Yeah.
everywhere and I was also a giant nerd my whole life. I liked DC and Marvel. I was an anime manga kid openly before it was cool. Like when everyone was like
Wow.
Dragon Ball Z is lame, I'm like, no, it isn't. Like I was
Absolutely not. Wait, when was Dragon Ball Z ever? I'm so, hold the phone. There was no time. There's no point in space time on the continuum when Dragon Ball Z has ever been like,
Did you watch Dragon Ball Daima? I'm going to hold you to this.
oh my gosh,
It's the
no,
new
I'm so
Dragon Ball
sorry.
that came out. It's
I'm losing all my
Toriyama's
sleep
last
there.
work.
Dang, is it good?
Oh, fantastic.
Wow. All right, I gotta get that on. So okay, so you're an early adopter of weeb culture, which I am
Oh,
sort of a
I
late
was an
arrival.
otaku before otakus were things.
This is I'm kind of like gradually earning. I feel like I'm an apprentice otaku. I'm learning Japanese and I'm like trying to become an otaku. I'm not yet. But anyway, like so you know exactly that and I called my friends atheists. It's not entirely true. Some of us were sort of open or seeking or questioning, but generally like the assumption among the smart set was that truth is like physics, right? So like material facts, and this is what's real, and everything else is like it's nice for your culture. Maybe you go to church, maybe you don't, but like we so admire. We wanted to be Christopher Hitchens, right?
But these are all things too that God and Jesus would be okay with as young kids, right? They want human beings to explore, especially in adolescence, right? They
Mm,
were okay with that portion, but eventually when you look at morality, and I always like to burst the bubble of any of my atheist or agnostic friends, I'm
uh-huh.
like, you realize that our laws and our morals come from Judeo-Christian values. So you're by default Judeo-Christian,
Yeah, I
just
bet
off
that makes
what you
you
believe
real
is
popular.
correct and incorrect.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, that is something that's an argument that's been become a lot more prevalent recently. I don't know if you ever came across a book called Dominion by Tom Holland. It came out
Yes.
fairly
I
recently.
didn't
Yeah.
read it, but I know of it.
Another go if you're looking for another good audiobook after you finish the which one was
Anxious
it you said?
Generation.
After you finish Extra Generation, yeah, the Dominion would be another great one. Um but that argument has become just really forceful, especially like in the wake of all the woke stuff when
Yeah.
we suddenly saw, oh, there are other forms of morality, right? There's like pagan morality, basically, and there's blood guilt, and there's honor culture, and there's all
Yeah.
these other things. And it's like, oh, so actually the things that we hold to be self-evident, they are self-evidently true, but they are not obvious to everybody. Like they come from somewhere. So
Yep.
right, there's that dimension of it. And I agree that, God, my experience at least of God is that he meets you exactly where you are, and that there are people, at every age, at every stage who like everyone I think can take the next step toward like figuring out good answers to these ultimate questions. I will say though that there is a difference. Individuals, yes, like that, everyone is wherever he is, but we also all grow up surrounded by a culture,
Yes.
and we're immersed. We don't even realize we're immersed in a culture. And this is like I think it's David Foster Wallace who made the graduation speech where he told the story about the fish, and it's two fish, young fish, swimming through the water, and an older fish swims by and says, "How's the water, boys?" And one young fish turns to the other and says, "What's water?" Which is like
It
that's
makes sense though. It makes
yeah,
sense because they wouldn't like we wouldn't necessarily go like, well, how's the air? It's like it's there. It's what we breathe. It's what we know. It's by default. And
right.
I think from one of my observations, and I with talking to young people and things like that, they are noticing the narcissism that they have been surrounded by.
Mm,
And I think more than embracing religion itself, it is trying to find that release from the narcissism that they have surrounded themselves. And I kind of caught in that cycle of having to do it, right? Because social media just begets narcissism. And it's all about me. It's all about everything I want to do. Like, look, I have a freaking podcast named after me, right? Like, what's more narcissistic than that?
you're a brand, dude. I'm sorry to inform you. You are literally a brand.
It is. And
Yeah.
but that's all it is. And that's what you're trying to do. And I think this generation is slowly realizing that everyone's a narcissist and they're kind of getting tired from it.
Yeah.
And I think that it's kind of wanting them to explore. Now, whether it's going to bring them to Christianity, who knows? But I think they want to go towards something that is not collectivist, but more community based, but not communism, like something that where they can find common values with people again, not just over a phone.
Yes. Yes. Well, this is definitely, I think you put that really well, that it's by no means apparent that we're on the verge of a Christian revival. I mean, there
Mhm.
are signs in certain areas that that's
Yeah.
what's going on. And as you said, America and the West are stamped so deeply with Judeo-Christian ideas that that's where the inertia sort of center of gravity is going to
Our
go.
laws are based off the 10 commandments. Our basic laws
Precisely.
are quite literally based. Like, there's a reason why we don't like cheating. It's
Right.
because in the 10 commandments, adultery is bad, right? There's a reason why we want people to look each other in the eye and respect their elders, their mother and father, because that is, honor thy father, thy mother. Like, there are just basic tenets of Christianity and Judaism that's, like you said, ingrained and implanted in the Western culture.
And all the stuff we say about caring for the weak. I mean, we have all of these very counterintuitive but deep set moral impulses. Like we treat everybody with equal dignity and respect, even if
Mhm.
they're disabled, even if they don't look like us, even if we come from somewhere, right? I mean, that is like people have no idea until you study ancient history or history more broadly. You have no idea how unusual that
Or you
is
just
to
go
think
around the
about.
world, which I haven't been, but it's like you study and you talk to people that have been, and it's like
Yeah.
they'll talk about other countries, and then you go in and be like, "Yeah, but how racist are they?" They're like, "Oh, they're terribly racist. They hate
So
everybody."
racist, right?
Like
They
like
like
we don't realize just how non-racist and how accepting we are at our worst times in America. We are still one of the most accepting and open societies that has ever existed.
100%. So this is a bit of a sidebar, but
That's okay. I
speaking
like
of
this.
audiobooks, I just listened to this book called Flowers of Fire, which is about the South Korean feminist movement. And
That sounds awesome.
it was wild. It was the
Yeah,
most insane time. It was part of a book club, like this online. So I read for this magazine, and
I'm
the
writing that
featured
down.
authors for this magazine. I have so many Audible recommendations for you. Actually, I've been on a real Audible kick lately.
I'm never going to
So
listen to a podcast again because all I'm
I
going to
know
do is listen.
I'm having that problem too. Some podcasts I have to listen to for work, and I'm like kind of behind on them. But Flowers of Fire is one good Audible read or listen or whatever. Um, Remind me to come back to the others because I have a couple I think you'll really like. But
I love it.
this one is so bizarre because I don't know if you remember that some women online did this thing, the 4B movement after Trump won the second time, and it was a South Korean movement. It was like no sex, no pregnancy, no marriage until
I
you respect our rights,
Yeah.
or whatever. Or maybe it was Roe v. Wade. I forget what it was, but anyway, this was a South Korean import. But that in turn was like a re-importation because we had already exported Me Too to South
Mhm.
Korea. Like South Korea got into Me Too in a big way. So you're listening to this book but you realize that the catch is all the stuff that they said during American Me Too that seemed completely out of pocket, just wildly over the top, like rape. America has a rape culture, right? Like all men, yes, all men. It's like all that stuff is kind of true in South Korea. Like they genuinely do have an epidemic of like upskirting and spy cams and whatever. So I only raise this just to reinforce your point that it's like we have no idea when we go around talking about Western imperial patriarchal misogynist, whatever. It's like you don't even know what those words mean. Like we're so far down the road of Judeo-Christian.
It's almost like thank God for MacArthur and staying in Japan for so long as like a pseudo emperor because he kind of made them little America. And Japan has, they blended their kind of honorish culture with Western values. Japan is like the perfect blend of that Asian culture of being very strict, very honor driven, but with Westernism thrown in. And we kind of see the proof of that pudding over there because they do have a much more capitalistic style of thinking about things, but to an extreme where if you're a young man, go be a salaryman and work 80 hours a week minimum.
Yeah.
And they're committing suicide at massive rates because that is also not a good thing to do to individuals to work them to the bone.
Yeah, it's kind of like it feels a bit like a dark shadow mirror side of
Yeah, kind of.
American culture. Like,
Yeah.
and there's so much here we could kind of like talk about all of this
We could
for
talk for like
the
6 hours and
the
unpack
whole show.
this.
Exactly. There's like this is a to me, and this is why I'm becoming an otaku, by the way, is because I'm just
Yes.
so obsessed with what happens to a culture when you like slice off its ancestral roots before they have a chance to like
But
develop.
just imagine, because they were trending in, and this is such a fun sidebar, but they were
Yeah.
trending in such a way of China, right? Because they were
Yeah.
basically mirroring China's history in so many ways, where China had their warring states period and their unification through the warring kingdoms. Japan, what was it, 100, 200 years later, went through
Yeah.
their own warring states period
Mm.
where there was a forced unification and things like that. And they were so closely mirroring in so many ways that China was so fearful of Japan. And I think people forget, and this is always one thing I love to bring up. Everyone's like, China's going to own us. It's like China still owes us from rebuilding them. After World War II, when Japan firebombed them because everything they had was still built of wood. And
Mm.
after the war, America gave them billions of dollars to rebuild what is Shanghai now, what is Beijing now, what is all their major metropolises. But these are things that are very much glossed over. And China's a power now because we went in and helped rebuild after World War II. They
So
were
interesting. Yeah.
leveled by Japan after World War II. Japan just went in there and kicked the crap out of them. And they were still reeling off the Sino-Russo war that they weren't fully recovered from either at that point. So
Wow. Yeah. Yeah.
there's just, it's so much going in with that. And the fact that Japan had such a switch, like you said, that it was kind of that slicing off of history and kind of keeping the better parts of
Yeah.
their history while integrating good, but now I think maybe becoming almost bad parts. It's a bizarre, it's a fun little microscope to look at.
It definitely is, and it all reminds me of this moment in Thucydides, the Peloponnesian War. So he's talking about the great power conflict between Athens and Sparta, right?
Yeah.
And this situation basically emerges where they beat their foreign enemy, they beat the Persians,
Hmm.
and then they have, and I think this is originally something somebody said about NATO, but it applies very much to Athens. They have supremacy by invitation. So it's like all these other city states basically ask them to take over, and they
Yeah.
become this dominant power in the Mediterranean, and this creates what is sometimes called the Thucydides trap, that they're on a collision course now with Sparta, which is the older power in the
Hmm.
region. Anyway, they get to this point where Athens has never thought of itself as an empire. They've thought of themselves as a democracy. This is their big claim to fame, right? Is that they have become, unlike any other city state, they have this direct democracy.
Yep.
But Pericles, their great statesman who leads them through this time, has a speech where he says it may have been an error or a moral failing to acquire your empire, but it would be extremely dangerous to give it up. And I feel like America is like in that same position where it's like we don't want to be an empire. We never chose. We think of ourselves as a republic and having these democratic institutions. However, the way things have shaken out, there are many countries which are functionally protectorates of the United States, and like Japan is sort of one of them. Like it bears our imprint in this big way, and
And it's so
these.
funny that there was that warning in Athens. And what was the same warning that George Washington gave in his address, right?
Hmm,
Avoid entangling alliances and avoid parties. Those were his two biggest things in his farewell address that will always be remembered. And what did America do damn near almost immediately after he was done? They started getting in entangling alliances with France. They, things like that. They were trying with England before the
yeah.
War of 1812, where England kind of, and then after that, no choice. But we started to form all these international alliances, and
Mm,
immediately the Whigs and the Democrats basically were created.
yeah.
And it was already fermenting. Washington was kind of that one holding it together because already Jefferson and Hamilton hated each other. They already that those factions were you saw them with the Federalist and Anti-Federalist papers. It was always bubbling.
Yeah.
But it's interesting that history kind of has that repetition, right? Where fortunately, I think that we have more safeguards in being a republic as long as, like Ben Franklin said, a republic if you can keep it, right?
Yeah, that was the idea. We'll see. But yeah,
And
I think you're right. Yeah.
and I think we need to start to re-educate our kids into and our masses in people are like, well, we move slow. And it's like, yes, we
We
do.
sure do.
We're
You're damn
supposed to.
right we do.
We're
The
supposed to because what we're doing right now, I don't know about you, but it pisses me every time. It pisses me off every time I see a bill pass via cloture. And it's like, oh, it's
Right,
just over 50%. It's like that's not a bill, y'all. It's supposed to
right,
be 66 for a reason. If
right.
you can't prove the plurality wants this, then it's not a good law. Like, I'm sorry. If we can't make the argument as conservatives that our way of life is better to get 66% of the representatives to go our way, then
Yeah.
maybe it's not the best way. We believe it is. But to me, like cloture needs to be eliminated from all of Congress.
So this is actually directly related to what we started off talking about, which is this like potential revival slash as you put it, just
Look
like
at you being a better host than me, bringing it back.
rebel from narcissism. I would just, I love, how Trump talks about the weave. Did you watch Trump on Rogan? Where
Yeah.
he's
Oh
like,
my God. The weave is amazing.
you got to do the
He's,
weave. You got to
he's
do
so
I
good.
feel like a good stream is all about the weave,
It
So we're
is.
just weaving back here a little bit, but like, so uh, here's why, and it might take me like a bit of I might spurg out a second
The floor
before
is
I can
yours.
explain. Thank you. So, these things that you're describing about the problems of empire, the catastrophes that Washington warned against, factionalism and foreign entanglements, it's possible, not certain, but possible that Washington was absolutely right about the dangers of those things, and there's no version of the timeline of the history of the United States where we don't end up in this position. And
Yeah.
it gets you into these eternal questions of great man theory of history, right? Like, is capital H history sort of roiling and rolling on without any of our say so, and we can only just kind of accept or not?
Karl
Or
Marx and Hegel would say yes.
they would, and so interestingly, would Leo Tolstoy, somewhat
Yes.
less objectionable figure, right? So,
Hmm.
I mean, Tolstoy looks at Napoleon, and to me, this feels a bit like sour grapes, but who am I to say? He's like, okay, it wasn't really Napoleon, right? It could have been Joe Schmo. It
Hmm.
could have been Steve, like, or whatever, Esteban, or whatever the French version of Stephen is Stefan. Anyway, this is definitely a digression. But
Semantics.
in any case, it could have been some guy, right? Um, France was just ready, and Europe was just ready at that point. And of course, there was the ancient theory of the cycle of regimes that France, if any nation, has really demonstrated that in the modern day. I would argue it is France. Like, you've got this mob rule, which devolves into chaos, and then ultimately a strongman like Napoleon comes in.
Hmm.
So Tolstoy would sort of be like, these are the things that just happen. Others would plausibly say, like, no, actually, if you don't have Napoleon or if you don't have Caesar, you don't have that history. Like, these are extraordinary individuals. I think Plutarch might be in this domain, right? Where
Yeah.
he's like,
Yeah.
this is why he's writing biographies. These are extraordinary individuals, and their character matters, and their actions matter. And so, my kind of approach here is a little bit like G.K. Chesterton had often said that, like, ordinary people are smarter because they hold two contradictory thoughts in their head at once, not because they don't have like a and so I feel like the ordinary person's kind of intuitive feel here is, yeah, both of those things are true. Like, history does kind of roll along, and also major players, Donald Trump, for example, can turn their head by, like, whatever, the cute, 15-degree angle, and
Yep.
all of a sudden, like, the future of America looks radically different. And so
100%.
this is like where we're at, I feel, is we have reached a very, very perilous moment of our
But I
history.
guess the plausibility of that is, does it though? Does JD Vance step up and get pushed further because that happens to Donald Trump? And does he rise up and take Don Jr. as his VP? And now that cult of personality is still there, which could have been a very plausible thing, right? And almost prove the fact that history just rolls.
Well,
Like,
right.
like
This is the war game, right? And of course, there's
exactly.
no answer because we
No.
only have the one timeline. And this is
Yes.
also why, like, Marvel movies suck now. I know that's a bit of a pivot,
No,
but
no, no.
Marvel movies
They
suck because,
suck.
like, you can only, like, good stories like life only have one. There is no counterfactual. There's no multiverse.
I
There's no
recommend. Do you know Eric July? You know who
no
he is?
no.
He is a Blaze personality. He's a YouTuber, and he started a comic book company called the Rippaverse, where he got like people from Marvel, DC that were tired of the bullshit with
Yeah,
wokeness. And his promise, number one, I have a few of his comics. They're fantastic. They're good superhero comics, number one. But
yeah.
number two, he promised no multiverse. None.
Interesting.
If a character
Interesting.
dies, they die.
Yeah,
So
that's crucial.
go read the Rippaverse. You'll like it.
I love it. That sounds great. No, multiverse is one of my, like, horses that I'm always beating because it
It's
is scientifically, philosophically, and also narratively. I mean, Aristotle is like big on this. It's about cause and effect, and so we don't get told any story other than the one that happens, which is why this is ultimately kind of an unanswerable question.
mhm.
But what seems definitely true is, from our perspective, we can only act as if we do have free will, right? We
Yes.
experience the world as agents who can make choices. And we are in a moment when America has just passed through very, very choppy waters. into a new moment, a new era in its history. And I think like even the most dedicated Trump opponent might agree with you about
Yeah.
this. Like, might say, oh, yes, it's terrible, but in fact, Trump 2.0 really is a new epoch. And I think, I mean, there was just a Pew study showing that the decline in religious observation attendance that has been going on again our whole lives
Yep.
seems to have bottomed out. In other words, it's not like kids are getting more religious yet, but that inflection point has been hit where like they're not getting less religious anymore. And if we believe we have free will, it can affect things, which I do. I actually think it's like, you know, it's always important, I guess, to be evangelizing and to be having good conversations and all of that. But it's like you in your role as a driving instructor. I don't know. I think of you in that car with those kids, and I'm like, this is actually the stakes are really high. No pressure or anything, but like you're actually participating in something
Yes.
hugely
And it's
consequential.
hilarious too because I look at your work at Claremont and your work and the things that you're doing, and it's like you're doing it in a different realm where
Yeah,
also the
I
stakes
mean,
are high
everybody
because
fish got to swim, bird got to fly, right? Like
exactly like
that's
that like you're
yeah.
you're fighting a major intellectual battle that I think is as important because while I'm doing the groundwork, you're battling in a different plane that possibly has more consequences as a trickle down in a lot of ways, right? I'm doing those things. It's like, but the battles need to be fought everywhere. So I have an interesting question for you, and this does pertain to our religious topic as well.
Mm,
How much do kind of the stories in the Bible where you have your great man stories, right? You have
mm.
your David versus Goliath, you have your Moses. I consider them your great man stories, and also some of our fables, like things from Homer and things like that. How much do those play into people rising up to be those great individuals, whether they do terrible things or great things, right? With all of our great figures, with our Churchills, our Trumps, our Stalins, our Hitler, like all of them have had some influence, and these stories I feel like they stick in our heads, right? And there's a reason why like the epic is such an important tale and why
Yeah,
the epic has been told so many different ways, but it's all the same, right?
yeah,
It's all
yeah,
the
yeah.
same, but it's told in different ways. How important have these stories, whether biblical, non-biblical, been in your opinion to getting these great men to rise and things like that?
What a cool question. I mean, I'm just thinking like an essay or a book called The Great Man Theory of the Bible, which just
Do
like
it. Just
absolutely slap.
give me the thanks for the intro. That's it. Like I just want thanks to
Terrific.
Alex for this question. That's it. Alex Questa for the
Oh,
question. Then you don't have to mention me again after that.
you at least get a couple free copies, free advance copies. That's
I'll
like
take that too.
bare
100%.
minimum. You're selling yourself way too short. You got to learn how to do contract negotiations, bro.
I'm
But no,
terrible at
me too. But
that.
well, okay. So I guess there are a couple stories from the Bible that really speak to this in an interesting way. The first one is a small moment that people don't necessarily always notice, but it's when God is giving instructions for the building of the first temple in Jerusalem. And this is a part that a lot of people skip over.
Well, because it's really because number one, they're speaking in measurements that we don't understand anymore, right? A lot of those
Right.
measurements, we have
Cubits
no
and
idea what the
yeah.
hell they're saying. And they
Yeah.
seem confusing and they seem contradictory in some ways and very easy to gloss over, right? I agree. Go ahead, keep going.
Also, and like, God forgive me, but they are boring. Like this is a
Hell
boring part of
yeah.
the Bible. They're so boring.
I
And
tell everyone, get past the Old Testament because the Old Testament's important. Get
mm,
past it and get to the parables of the New Testament, and you will
mhm.
not stop reading because the
That's yeah.
parables are incredible and they are great stories. Sorry, go ahead. I interrupted, but I think
And
that's just
works of
like
art.
it's so
Yes,
important.
definitely. It's boring, but it is kind of amazing when you think about it as like a historical document. So you're like, okay,
It
these are
is.
like specs.
Yeah.
These are actual specifications for like minute detail for a building that no longer
And
exists.
they work.
And they work. You can build it, right? Like, if you sort of assume that we vaguely can estimate what a cubit is and so on and so forth, right? But yes, so okay, in this process, there is a moment where there are two architects named for the building of the temple, and their names are in the Bible in a way that like does not square with a lot of the other comparative literature we might have from the time. And it says, name these guys, pick these guys, for God has given them skill and insight in metalworking. And it's like basically saying, hey, my buddy Joe, like he's really good at it. It's like, oh, I need somebody to run like my social media. Well, I know this guy that like is really good at that.
And
So
we say that
there's
God-given talent, right?
totally, yes, exactly, which is also from a parable and from a New Testament parable,
Yep.
and a measurement that we do know how much a talent was, we think.
Mhm.
In any case, yes. So clearly in the Bible and uniquely in the Old Testament relative to sort of contemporary literature, the sense of the individual is very, very alive. Like yes, there's a much thicker sense of the collective as well, and family is very important in a way that like we've kind of lost, and all of that is true. At the same time, like God is sort of like fussing over the assignments list, right? He's like drawing up a cat because each person is distinct. The other thing that happens later on is that the Israelites, or no, this is before that actually, before the creation of the temple, I think. No, that's wrong. I'm gonna get this. Whatever. There's another story. It's not important. There's another story when the Israelites ask for a
Your
king.
theologists are going to be real mad at you right now.
They're going to be super pissed, but it's okay because I am just a humble classicist. I'm not really in charge of the sequence of events. So also everybody, yeah. Anyway, okay. So don't at me, but there is another story. The Israelites have asked for a king, and this, speaking of, oh, yeah, speaking of, like the cycle of regimes, right? This is the Bible's version of the cycle of regimes. It's like Israel has reached a point where they are wanting somebody to lead them the way these other civilizations lead them. And this is a terrible thing. It's a disaster because God has said that he is their king, right? And so they're supposed to just have these judges that occasionally sort of get in charge. But,
And
you
you
know,
would think that that's the utopia that man would be looking for, right? Where they have free reign, free will, and
right,
no true leader or master. And this is, and I think I could see where you're getting at,
right.
where
It
they're
sounds awesome.
looking for the great man.
They're inviting a great man world into being, which is the world all around them. And they're seeing that. And yes, like the setup they had was golden, but it was freedom and it was hard, right? So it's very
Now,
difficult.
do you think God had allowed these other civilizations to exist as a test to see if man would pass or fail? Because, obviously the theory of God, he's all knowing and everything, but he did give us freedom of choice. So I think there are some things where God even leaves as a mystery to play a game with
Well,
himself.
definitely, I think like God. So the Christian idea is that the world is a product mainly of human choice. That God, right,
Mhm.
for because he wants us to love him, he wants us to be free, and if we're free, we have to really be free, and we have chosen wrong, right? Like that is sort of the central part of the Christian narrative. Sure explains a lot that I see around me. But in any case, like, yeah, we're chosen wrong. And so unless God intervenes, we will we'll mess things up, right? So I guess like does God, God foreknew from his perspective, it's kind of impossible for us to conceive because he's seeing all moments at one time. But he also knows how it looks to us. And to us, it looks like, okay, so we have this backdrop. He sort of allows there to be this backdrop of like, this is what people do on their own, left to their own devices. You get a big guy with a big club and he hits everybody on the head until they worship his God and they build his temple. And that's basically the standard if we are left to our own devices. And then that's part of the point of the chosen people, where he reaches in and he's like, the Israelites, the Jews, are going to show you the other way, right?
He
This is
gets so mad at them when
all the time.
oh my god, all the time. Like I remember, like, I want to know what stiff-necked actually translates to now. Like, what
What would we say now?
what would we call
Yeah.
they are a stiff-necked people. It's
Yeah,
like,
yeah,
what does that
yeah.
mean?
Pain in the
God curses
ass.
a lot.
Yeah, right,
God curses a
exactly.
lot in the Old Testament.
There's definitely like a ton of right. Like I mean, if they had known what being the chosen people meant, they probably would have returned their ticket. Thank you very much, right? Because
Yes.
means that they're held to this higher standard, and they are, you know, people say this absolutely to me like brain dead and illiterate thing where they're like, oh, the Jews killed Christ or whatever. They're like get very mad about it. It's like the whole point. of the crucifixion is that if anybody was going to get the Messiah right, it was going to be the Jews because they were the chosen people. And
Yep.
so, since they don't, since they do crucify him, you know that you would have too, right? Because like they are the best that humanity has to offer at that juncture.
And also, even at that note, it was, I think, too less as you read the story, it was the elites that crucified Jesus. It was the leaders of the church that were tired of him showing them up. It was the Romans who did not believe in his blasphemy. And it was them that did it, but it was the cowardice of the people that did believe that allowed it to happen. And I think that is the bigger shame, right? That, and I think if there is any fault of the Jews, it is not that they did it, it's that they didn't stop it, right? Like if you're reading in a certain way, because it's not like the Jews didn't, they didn't necessarily, it was the power that killed him in
Yeah,
so many
and
ways.
they, like, as always, they are acting out dysfunctions that are representative of all of us, right? So it's a very classic, I would almost call it, it's interesting way of thinking about it, right? As elites and the people, and I think
Yeah.
that's absolutely right. I mean, Machiavelli has this amazing passage where he talks about Rome and how Rome fell apart, and he does portray it as like a dysfunction, mutual dysfunction between the elites and the people, and each has a role to play. The elites are the ones who are threatened by truth and goodness, and so they destroy it. The people, right, are allow themselves to be too easily swayed. They
Well, to the
are,
point of Pontius Pilate admitted he knew he killed Christ. He killed the Son of God, and he still went through with it. And you're talking about Machiavelli, also Dante, right? Dante's Divine Trilogy is
mm,
very much about the, just the, especially the Inferno, is just his hatred and how terrible the elites are in so many ways, and just the corruption of the
mm.
elites. And it's a tale as old as time, right? That just the power want to continue to have power. Now, would you consider Abraham to be the original great man in a lot of ways? Because he spurred, three religions are based off of him, right? They are the Abrahamic religions for a reason.
Well, he definitely stands in that perfect biblical place where he is arguably one of the greatest men of all history.
Technically the oldest, I believe, right? In the Bible, he ended up being the oldest.
Isn't that Methuselah? I can't
Did
remember, but
Methuselah get the old? Yeah, he actually, Methuselah was the oldest. Yes.
Methuselah, because his, if you were a Methuselah, you're super old. That's the only reason
Yes.
I think
Yes.
that.
Yes.
But
Yes. That's true.
so, yeah, I think like Abraham, right? Generations like the stars of heaven and the sands on the seashore, right? And so in that way, yes, absolutely. Like this guy and not somebody else. God picks this dude. And at the same time, though, it's God's choice of him that makes him that, right? So there's also this big historical plan working out,
Yep.
which is sort of not really, he doesn't get to pick what that looks like. And so there's always both of those things. And similarly, my reason for bringing up the king's story is that likewise, God anoints after telling them. God sends through Eli, he had, or through Samuel rather,
Yep.
he has this whole long thing about how utterly disastrous it's going to be when they have a king. It's gonna be, they're gonna take your sons and turn them into slaves, and your daughters will be wives and concubines, and it's gonna be, you're gonna hate it. And they're like, great, sign us up. Like, that sounds good. Thank you. Yes. And then when they do that, he says, okay, it's not Samuel they've rejected, it's me. And then this is the kicker. Then he anoints a king. So it's like,
And not even
eh,
that, though. In
yeah,
his mercy, he finds and anoints the best among them to be their first king. So it was,
right.
while this is going to eventually suck, I'm going to at least give you guys the benefit of the doubt at first and give you the best among you, right? Like it's a
Yes.
blessing. He still continues to bless the people that have rejected him.
And it speaks to your point about the other peoples. It's like whatever the situation is. So the situation just is that there's kingship around the world. God reaches into that and he creates the Israelites. Then the Israelites choose kingship and he reaches into that situation. I mean, it goes back to Genesis when Adam and Eve sin. Part of the consequences of their sin is that they are no longer comfortable in their nakedness, right? They're
And then
they're
also, women can
ashamed.
never choose what they want to eat now.
And that's
That is the reason why women cannot choose what to eat. Is
is
because the
that
last time she
why
chose,
she got burned?
she
Yeah.
doomed the whole entire people.
Honestly, that honestly makes me feel better about it now. It's like, okay, well, at least there's a good reason behind
I'm not going to take that. I
it.
actually saw that from a meme, and I was like, I need to use that
That's
somewhere.
very, very funny. Very funny. But so, okay, so they can feel ashamed of their nakedness.
Yep.
The first thing God does is he makes them clothes. So it's like
Yeah.
they created the situation. And now God is like entering into that context. He didn't make the need for clothes. He made them naked and fine and happy. But now it's like this is the way it is. So this is what God's working with. And like
Yep.
kingship too. And Abraham, I mean, Abraham is a worshiper. I think the most likely sort of scholarly idea is that he would have been the worshiper of a moon god among Ur of the Chaldeans.
Yep.
And God presents himself first as the deity that's going to make Abraham's family great, right? Which is the way the ancient Near Eastern religion works, is everybody has their little patron god.
Yep.
And God basically says, I'm going to be the best patron god for you. He doesn't quite say it in those terms, but that's what Abraham probably would have thought. And then gradually over time, Abraham realizes, oh, also this is the only God. Also, or
And he's working through me to show other people that their gods are false.
right.
He is the only one. And, and the thing that I find crazy, there's a little bit of a shift because we talk about the potential of bringing back a religion in America,
Mm,
right? And there's
yeah.
so many ways we can get into Christianity. But there is no denying that the fastest growing religion is still Islam.
Right.
And so I'm curious. And for me, I was actually blessed enough where one of the people I worked with, I've worked many a job. Okay.
Okay.
I worked at one point with, unfortunate children that were put into a system basically before they went off to other bad situations and things like that.
Okay.
And one of my bosses, we worked in a group home type of setting. He was a house parent and he was a devout Muslim,
Mhm.
prayed 3 times a day, read the Quran every day. And we had great conversations just about Christianity and Islam and all the differences and things like that, and my cursory knowledge of Christianity. And he was devout, so he was very knowledgeable about the Quran.
Mm.
And because of our conversations, I think I have it somewhere here, he gave me a very hard to find English translated Quran. And he said that these are almost damn near impossible because they don't really do that.
Mm.
And just by looking through it, in my eyes, I'm like, I really just want Islam to grow up around the world because
Mm.
they are in such a bad, like, when we look at our history, like, obviously Christianity went through the Crusades, right? And the Crusades were a crappy time where it was like a very much a pushback against a new Abrahamic religion, right? We wanted to
Mm.
smack down Islam. We're the only one. And that's, obviously a very broad view of what the Crusades were.
Mm.
But as you read, if you read through the Quran, I think we have such a skewed view because of what we've been dealing with for the past 60, 70 years, which in the grand scheme of thing is very short. But
Interesting. Yeah.
we're dealing with, I don't know if you've read through the Quran at all,
Oh yeah.
but have you?
Oh yeah. That was a
Yeah.
big part of my coming to Christianity was reading a bunch of different
Yes.
scriptures. Yeah.
But the thing
Yeah.
is, and don't get me wrong, I still believe, but when you read through the Quran, yes, there is that violent part, right? Of Muhammad the warrior and things like that.
Sure.
But there are parts of Islam that are, like they say, more peaceful and more enlightening and hopeful and things like that. And for me, I feel like it's just what we see with the Islamists is they bastardize it and they give it all
Mm.
such a bad name where they only stick to one part. We're not teaching the full religion in general, not embracing the full religion.
Yeah. Well, here's what I'd say, uh, and this may be controversial. I don't know. I
That's
I
okay.
feel like God can work better with a Muslim than with a nun, like with somebody that just doesn't even know that there's a need for any. You talk to some people sometimes, and it's like, wait, you think that God created morality? Like, we don't need, we can just be good people, right? Like, we can just be, and that's a person where I'm like, I don't even know how. Obviously, there's hope for everybody. Everybody can be redeemed, but it's like, I don't even know how. You don't even realize that we're, you haven't even entered the chat yet, right? Like,
That's when you hit them with the beginning line, like, hey, you know where your Western morals come from?
exactly.
Like,
But like, but often, I mean, don't you find this like sometimes
oh, yeah.
people you say that to people, and it's like talking to a wall, and there's just like this. So it's like that is just much harder to break through to than your friend, the devout Muslim, who I'm sure it sounds like, is working in this very virtuous profession. And it's like on the very first basic fundamentals, we're probably agreed, right? Like there's all sorts of stuff that's definitely incompatible when you
Of
get
course.
like further down the list.
Yeah.
But it's like, is there a God? Do we need religion for morality? Like all of these things. And so it's tough because, Europe has had this absolutely hellacious problem with migration from Muslim majority countries, right?
Yeah, their proximity to that is terrible, and and even the Scandinavian nations too, where
Yes.
you want to talk about some of the most shut in racist nations. The Scandinavians were the worst, and then look at Sweden. Sweden's trying to figure out any way to get them out of there now.
Yeah. And this
Anyway,
is to come
like,
back to the elites, right? Like this is
yep.
just a total betrayal of the people of Europe by a bunch of guys sitting around in Davos who have a theory that is garbage
I
about
mean,
how life should work.
London Stan exists right now. That is
I
quite literally
it's
what it is.
I grew up in London, and I agree with you. I mean, when I
It's
visit
sad.
again, it's insane.
Yeah,
And so this has created like much very understandable hostility toward not just Islamism. I think at this point it's hostility among again young people
yeah.
toward like Islam because they're like if they might have been more tolerant in an age when borders were sane, now they're just like, Ausländer raus is the German version. It's like, just get out, right? And so we do like, and it's very difficult because even if another culture, you can respect another culture without wanting your culture to become that culture.
Yes, 100%.
And this is something that the the liberal brain cannot comprehend, but it is true. It's like, I might say take a less incendiary example. Sikhs, right? Adore Sikhs. Have known and loved many a Sikh, and I think their little hats are very cute. But like, but and I have that genuine and like want to welcome them
Yeah.
into our country, clearly productive members of society.
Mhm.
If tomorrow it was like, okay, 50% of Poughkeepsie is gonna be Sikh now, just like, airdropping them in.
Mhm.
It, suddenly I'd be like, man, I fucking hate Sikhs.
Yeah.
Like I have all the, because it would be like whatever Sikhism is, I can love it while also saying that's not us. Like that's not what this country is. That's not who its people are. And so that like is a very, very rational reaction to what's gone on in Europe with Islam. But it does mean it's hard then to acknowledge the equally true statement that most Muslims I have met have been very loving and intelligent and
And
wonderful
when you tell
people.
them you're a Christian, they're just like, "Oh, cool, you're our brother. We both believe in God."
Yes,
Like
right.
most, you're not. And there's, I think we need to separate your Islamists from your
Yes.
Muslims, from
Sure enough. Yeah.
your practitioners of Islam, and your individuals who understand that Sharia was a part of the Quran, but
Yeah.
not the main point of the Quran, right? Where from my cursory readings, Sharia was there, and then there's a whole lot of Muhammad later dismantling Sharia throughout the Quran as well. And where, there is angry God in the Old Testament, and then there's Jesus telling the parables and trying to convince the Father that we're worth it. And
Mm.
please don't Moses us again. Like human beings are worth being saved. And I'm so willing to tell you, Father, that these people are worth being saved, that I will die for them. Right. And
Mm.
which is, I think that's a huge difference between Judaism, Islam, and Christianity, right? Is Christianity has that divine sacrifice built in, where
Yes.
our most important figure didn't die naturally, didn't
Mm.
die gracefully, was killed by the people that he was trying to save. And I think that's such a different perspective, and what gives us a little bit of haughtiness about our religion in a lot of ways, right? Like we believe that our religion is the right way because our savior died for us and said, "Yo, I'll be back. If you're good, you're coming." Like
100%. And I'm on board with it. Like I am completely like no reservations. Christianity's best. It's better than all the other religions, and you should be it. That's what you should be.
Mhm.
But like having said that, okay, Christians will sometimes say, "Oh, Islam is this savage religion because look at all these internal contradictions or whatever." It's like Christianity is full of productive tensions, right? Like
We
there's
have
like an
so many denominations.
it's like exactly in the modern day, and then you go to the scripture, and it's like the very thing that you just described with Jesus is like these holy mysteries, right? There are things. Now, I think they correspond to the reality of mystery in the world that we encounter, but it's like the problem is not that there are conflicting strands of thought in the Quran, or that like there are things that seem to kind of militate in one direction or another. The problem is closer to what you were suggesting, which is that like it seems as if many Muslim societies have not yet like traveled through the history of wrestling with these things that the West has.
Which is so bizarre because at one point they did, right? With the Persian Empire, there were
Mm,
women who did not have to wear garbs, which served in the high parts of government there. Yes, they could never be supreme leader, but they were
mm,
on government seats. And the Persian Empire, while it was an empire, had a pseudo parliamentary system, not really a Politburo like the Marxists did, but more of a system of governors that could help make decisions with the empire. And women were a part of that. And it's such a weird, they took such a big step back in
mm.
so many ways. And maybe it was because the fall of the Persian Empire and then, an attempted revival with the Ottomans and then another kickback with the Ottomans that they've kind of been like, well, screw the West. We're just going to strong arm everything. Like, I don't know. And I think we might have to go into a little bit more of their leaders and read their stuff a little more. But it's very bizarre how they've taken sort of a step in that way back.
Well, it definitely seems as if it's a good point that like this is not necessarily so much a case of like they haven't reached the point yet, or because I'm very skittish and skeptical about like linear. There's something very inherently progressive about like, well, first you begin with feudal systems and then you go into modernity, and then all these people have all these rights, and isn't that great? But it's like I don't really think that's how it works, and I do think that the Muslim world, you know, would need to work out its own version of whatever it is. But having said that, they do need to do that, right? Like we
Yes,
have reached some
please,
sort of
please
set.
do it.
I please, like, yeah, exactly. Can you
Please,
just like from your brothers across the sea? It's like we would
please,
really love,
please reject
and
the Muslim Brotherhood and all the freaking terrorists and just come on.
and it's not like we have not created all sorts of problems and dysfunctions for ourselves in the modern world, but
Of course.
we are in the modern world, right? Like we have reached a certain degree of very carefully calibrated settlements that we
Hmm.
had to adjudicate over time, right? About like relationships between the sexes and how are we going to treat people that are on the margins, and all of these things that leftists now exploit
And
are
the
real
elites
features.
allowing the peasants to rise and have some sort of wealth, which is a massive blip in history. Like the
Yeah.
West allowing the peasants to actually have property and wealth and be
Yeah, that was
able
a
to
terrible idea. We never should let them get so uppity. This is a
right,
real
like
yeah,
it's such we don't realize just the blessing of a middle class, right? And just like
100%.
that is we like the 250 years that we have had a middle class, essentially, maybe less. Like the middle class really didn't start and like probably later in our history. We still had elites and lowers, but more like about a third into our history, we truly had a middle class with our first and second industrial revolutions, right? Is when we
Mm.
started really having it. And I think we take it for granted. And we take that the Western world just has a middle class for granted. And it's like you still go around the world and it's still upper class and dirt poor. Like we're very weird still and bizarre in our own world.
Two essential things to know about the middle class is one, everyone asks, how did Rome fall? In the case of the Roman Republic, this is the answer. They squeezed out their middle class, and it
Yep.
was the elites who did it because they wanted the land for themselves and not for the farmer.
Mhm.
Two, why didn't America go communist ultimately when so many other nations were falling for it? Because of the middle class.
Yep.
Marxists themselves acknowledged that the problem was they couldn't effectively argue that the state of the worker was
Herbert
miserable.
Marcuse said it
Right.
himself in Repressive Tolerance, right?
Yes.
That you can't the capitalism works too well for the people in the middle to have things to keep them happy. So again, and he also explained that we need to go exploit the ghetto class and the
This
people in
is
schools. Like
and
it
this
is,
is
it
how
is
you end
right
up with
there.
wokeness. Yeah, yeah. No, you
Yeah,
just
it's right there. It's written in. They write everything that
100%.
they're gonna do. Like
They are not subtle about it. And this is something I
no.
really admire. Chris Rufo, a guy I really admire,
Yeah.
is always just telling you what his strategy is. And it's something very interesting about him that he actually shares with his critical theory opponents that they also, I mean, Marcuse is a great example,
Yeah.
you know, and that essay, by the way, I'm so glad you mentioned repressive tolerance because it's such an important piece of writing,
We
like
live in
to
it.
understand about. Exactly. It's like it is the blueprint, or at least
Yeah.
it was until very recently. I don't know if like it's
Well, I mean, it
passing out of
still
favor.
is, right? Because it's a blend between that, Saul Alinsky's Rule for Radicals, and now if you go on beautifultrouble.org, it's kind of the updated version of Saul Alinsky, right?
Yeah, yeah. Hmm.
And and then that you blend in with like Paulo Freire's education, Gramsci's March through the Institutions. Like there's a blend there, and
Yeah.
they've taken some postmodernism and things like that, and the Frankfurt School critical theories. Like it's a smorgasbord that we've seen bubbling all throughout the world and being attempted in small different portions, right? And in America, it's so easier to do because we do allow cultures and theories and thoughts to all bubble and fester. And here we are. The attempt is
We
still happening. It's not like they stopped, y'all. They're still trying.
It's true. It's true. And they will regroup. And it's sort of interesting to watch the Democrats now like flail about because they they are in a bit of a pickle, right? I mean, it does seem like the not so much the wokeness, but the honest wokeness, the forthright expressions of what this stuff means, right? What did you think decolonization meant, right? After 10/7, when that happened, everybody was like, oh, well, if that's what it means, we don't like it. Or it's
From
like,
the
oh, you
river
have
to the
to
sea. What does
yeah,
that
yeah.
mean?
What do you
Like,
think that means? Or like, you have to let us secretly transition your child or you're homophobic. And people were like, "Oh, then I guess I'm homophobic." Okay, fine. Like,
happily homophobic.
yeah,
Stop
exactly.
touching my kid.
Sign
Like,
me up, right? Like, duh, yeah, exactly.
where's the
Um,
church? I'm going
right.
back to church.
Yes. And so like they created the situation and it's like now those are the only people with power in the party. And they desperately want to renormalize, but they sort of can't, like, because they're committed to these extreme positions.
It's so crazy too because I've talked to as many people that will listen because everyone's like, "Well, this shift just happened when AOC came and Obama really started it." And I'm like, "No, y'all, it happened under Woodrow Wilson." Like you want to, and it
100%.
happened under Teddy Roosevelt. We're being quite honest. When he started the Bull Moose Progressives,
Mhm.
he stepped away, and the only thing Teddy Roosevelt had in common with the Republicans is slavery bad. Everything else about a lot of his policies were what we're seeing today
Mhm.
because the progressives had that name and it was there. And FDR was the way he was because Uncle Teddy was very much that way. And so you look at it and just reading comments around the world, like this party has wanted to be this way. And it
Mhm.
was my belief that at some point post FDR, they were
Mhm.
like, listen, we can continue going leftward. We have the fourth estate. The media is on our side. They always have been. So we can continue gradually going leftward and we'll get our victory. Where they screwed up a little is Cenk Uger's dumbass made the Justice Democrats, found AOC, created the squad, they kicked the doors in, and Bernie was like, cool, more commies with me. And boom, they
Uh,
went super far left in that sense. And Obama was still doing that gradual shift, and he was succeeding, right? Because we have never been more split as a nation until Obama started saying cops acted dumb, everyone's racist, we're a failing country, and went around telling everyone we're a country on decline, we're not going to be great anymore, we just have to get used to it. And this is all memory hold stuff. I think people forget just how much of a shithead Barack Obama was about America.
I
The
have not
dude,
forgotten. I have
yeah,
not forgotten.
he just apologized to everyone. We were racist. We're
Yeah.
on decline. Our police suck,
Yeah.
and that was and. While doing that, he droned every country in the planet. So it's like he was so duplicitous in his ways. And it's like they talk about Donald Trump being dividing. Nothing divided this country more than Barack Obama. He was the biggest divider. And Donald Trump was everything Rush Limbaugh was telling us we wanted Republicans to be. The people
Mhm.
that fought back, the people that told the media to fuck off when they messed with you. Not George Bush, who was just like, well, they're wrong, but I'm going to let them say it. Like, no, we were tired of that. And I think that's, even though Trump isn't an ideal conservative, Trump is a Bill Clinton Democrat in still many ways, and he still pisses me off sometimes, but he's significantly better at handling things with the ways that I've hoped Republicans have handled things forever.
Well, once again, as we like contemplate, it seems like the theme of this podcast is the great man theory of history, and
There we go.
Trump is kind of like that perfect combination of he's a symptom and a cause, right? People say, "Oh, he's not really the source; he's just a symptom," and that is true. You know, he's the kind of man you would only want to elevate to the highest office in the land under the conditions you just so ably described,
He's
right? Like,
incredibly flawed. He's an
yeah.
incredible, but all great men are incredibly flawed, right?
They sure
All.
are. Yes, and their flaws are like s- the same
Gaping.
size as their greatness, right? They're sort of
Gaping.
like yeah. And so he's on the one hand only Trump. When he says only I can fix it, he's probably right. Like
Yeah.
only Trump can be in that position. On the other hand, it's only the conditions that we're in that make it necessary for Trump to beat. But it's certainly necessary. And I personally, I'm not tired of winning. I'm still,
Hell no.
I'm a little antsy about this tariff stuff. I'm not gonna lie. That gives me the heebie-jeebies. But again, early days, and so far, everything he's done, well, not like every last thing, but like I've been just enjoying myself to no end.
You want to know why I'm okay with the tariffs? Because if
Okay.
Trump all of a sudden just said, we're done dealing with any country in the world,
Uh-huh.
period, the globe goes into a recession and we survive as isolationists. We are still, our country could do everything. We have everything we need here. We don't realize how gigantic, massive, and resourceful we are. And that's why I have no fear of China. All he needs to do is just cut off every single export China ever does to us, and they are already a paper tiger economically. They
Yeah.
fail within a week economically. And it's like, so that's why, and I don't think he's pushing it too far. I think
Uh-huh.
Canada, well, and in my heart of hearts, I don't think he wants to do that. I
Right.
think he just wants these countries to sit there and go, all right, you're right. Let's make this a little more reasonable. Because what he thing is too, like he's not just going, I'm doing it because he's giving you the reasons of the glaring abuses that these other countries have been doing us economically because we are the biggest superpower and we can handle those abuses, right? And he's saying, well, no more. I don't want to get abused. I want to make money and have them also make money. I want to make this fair. And I don't think he wants to do the tariffs. I think he's using them, and I think he wants to end them as quickly as he starts them. Like I think he's hoping that obviously, I saw Pierre Poilievre made his dumbass comment, sitting there sounding like a friggin' Labor Party member, and that's when I realized that the best that Canada has is Mitt Romney, and it's like okay, like
Well,
Pierre
he's
Poilievre.
suffering though. He's suffering because of this. I mean, like Paul Revere is in a like a rough spot. No, listen. You may very well be right, and Trump is very good at exactly this. And I will say am not. I don't really like I've always said I'm kind of an idiot about the economy, and it's only the fact that the Biden economy was so extraordinarily boneheaded that an idiot like me could sort of point out what the problems were. Here, it does seem like a novel theory of America's economic relationships on the world stage is being tested.
Yeah,
And that it probably is time for some sort of revision because our current situation is very much an artifact of the post war world. It's very much like this is after the devastations of these two world wars. You know, it's to our advantage that Europe have some time and space to build back up, right? That's
yeah.
and so that we can preserve this sphere of influence that now has kind of fallen into our lap, and we want the good guys to be thriving and everybody else to kind of want in and to therefore have to come to the table. And so in that context, right, this sort of free trade arrangement and free trade, almost absolutism, makes a certain degree of sense. Now, I have no reservations at all about tariffs as a economic policy. It's not like I'm, setting my hair on fire over, oh, the precious Monroe Doctrine or whatever thing I'm supposed to be. I will say, however, that what worries me more is the potential political ramifications. So you're right. Like America can say fuck all these people, has a lot more fuck you money than anybody else, right?
By a lot. Yeah.
On the world stage. That's by a lot, by a lot, by a lot. And resources that we've been prevented by like blue-haired eco commies from accessing because we're scared they're gonna, like, I don't know, piss on the Edvard Munch painting in some museum or something. I don't know
Eh,
exactly what we were worried about, but in any case, like, so yes, all of that granted. However, there is a problem for Trump, which is that the people who elected him, I think both, speaking of holding two thoughts in your head at one time, many people had a vague sense, A, that Trump was going to reshore all this American manufacturing capacity, and B, that he was going to fix all the problems of the Biden economy. And you may be able to do each of those things in turn and ultimately together, but you can't actually do them both in the short term, I
no.
don't think. And so when Trump is up there saying to Congress, like, we're going to have a little bit of disturbance, it's not going to be a lot, but we're okay with that. It's like,
Are we
I
though?
are we, and are we like okay with it at a midterms level? So those are my worries. It's about Trump kind of shooting himself in the foot with all the other good stuff he's doing by getting too aggressive with tariffs and disappointing
Yeah.
people's expectations. That's my concern. Not
It's
like
very boomer
what are
bust.
we going to do about Canada?
I
It's
look at his
very what?
presidency as very boomer
Yeah.
bust. Like, if he accomplishes what he wants to, it's going to
Yep.
be
Okay.
incredible. But if he can't get it
Yeah.
done, we could be looking at a depression.
Yeah.
Like, I think we could be at that. I think it's either incredible success at a level that we will have never seen before, and the globe is better for it, right? Because we're booming, the globe booms.
Yep.
Or it doesn't go as well he wants it to, and then we could be living in some really bad times for at least a decade, at minimum. And I'm seeing that's going to be the two things. Now, a lot of it to me predicates on, you talk about the midterms. The best thing the Republicans can do right now is enshrine as much of Trump's agenda into law. Because why do most of your dominant parties lose midterms? Because they don't do shit for those first 2 years. They don't get anything
Yeah.
done. So then the people are like, well,
Mm.
Congress didn't do anything with as president, so let's see if we can fix it the other way. But I'm convinced that if they go in and they just start to codify a lot of these executive orders that are popular, they can go back and
Mm.
campaign for the midterms and go, listen, don't you want more of this as the people that already voted for me? Look at what we've been able to codify into law now. And I don't think the Republicans, and maybe the Uniparty doesn't want this, right? Because they like the shift. The Uniparty is okay with it because they stay the same. They love the
Yeah.
flipping of Congress because they don't change. The Uniparty shills are backed by the DNC, RNC. So they
Mm.
don't care. For them, if they can trim off the Ilhan Omar's, the AOCs, and get some new upstarts, and or if they can trim off, some of the, good populist conservatives, they're okay with that. Let the young ones come in and then just start rabble rousing again. But us old guard will stay here. And
Mm.
that's where they don't care. But the best thing for your conservatives that actually want to do the MAGA stuff without just talking about it
Mm-hmm.
is to codify the stuff in the law. Because then when it comes to midterms, that's a calling card. Hey, look at what I actually got done. I'm actually MAGA. Bring us back and elect more of us, right? And I want to bring up this quick comment by Nate G. Nate G is one of our resident super fans. He says Mexico and Canada equate to 1/50th of the U.S. GDP. U.S. is 1/5 of Canada's and 1/3 of Mexico's. Make our day. I love it, Nate.
Nice. Yeah, I mean that part we I think are all agreed on here. And when like Justin Trudeau is flipping out about like I don't know how he's gonna whack us with a pool noodle or
Well, I
something.
mean,
That
he's
that
gone officially, which is great.
that is phenomenal. That alone would be like if we can in any way chalk that up to the Trump presidency, it would be like a legacy win for him.
Yeah.
And yes, I think to the extent that MAGA policies are popular, even beyond the MAGA base, which they mostly are, right? Like
Yep.
most of those policies, the Doge stuff, everybody keeps saying, all the people on the left keep saying, like, oh my gosh, like he's really just he's being so extreme and he's bringing in this guy to do this like radical thing. It's like I think the American people, I think this is wildly popular. I think a super majority of Americans would say yes, cut and hack and slash. I think you would have to hold the American people back from like appointing a literal czar, not like one of the fake border czars they talk about,
Which
but like
I
an
hate that word.
actual,
I
you
hate
know,
that word. I hate that we
uh,
use the Russian term for leader as people that are appointed to do something. Like,
not
can't we
just
think
the
of a better
Russian term
fucking
for
word?
leader, but it comes from Caesar. It's
Yes.
ultimately right. It's
I
like
hate it so
this is
much.
the whole point is that we don't have czars. But yes, like but again, I think you could like effectively elect an actual czar to do Doge. Like that's how it's just yeah.
And my favorite part about Elon Musk is he'll do all this hacking, but the
Yeah.
moment he realizes, like, fuck, we needed those people, hire them all back. Like, I
That
think,
is
and
very
he gets,
funny.
and there's criticism that he gets criticism for cutting him and Trump, and then him and Trump get criticism when they hire back. Like, look at them, they were so stupid that they fired the wrong people. It's like, okay, but they're not idiots like the left who will make a mistake and never admit to it. They do it, and then they go, oh shit, we needed them,
They
hire
do
them
have this
back.
funny,
Like,
I know, this part is really funny to me and the left has yet to really catch on to it and make it part of their critique that like Trump does just sort of push buttons to see what happens. He's like, what this because this big and he's not doing it at random. Like he has
no,
a clear and good sense generally, I think, of what sorts of things might arise. But the tariff stuff, and this is part of what makes it so volatile. Some of it is just like, well, poke them and see what happens. And likewise with Doge, they are and like I'm not sure there's any other way to do this. This is
no,
the other
you got to
thing that
rip the band-aid off.
this is like, yeah, the other thing that people don't give enough time to is like, okay, yes, it would be really nice if we could cut what is it like however many billions of dollars, trillions of dollars like out of the budget with a scalpel. If it was like, but I'm not actually sure that that's how that because of the level of entrenched resistance, you
What
really do have
drives
to
me
take a man.
crazy though,
Yeah.
and this is where I say when on the show, I'll talk about good Elon, bad Elon, good Trump, bad Trump.
Uh-huh.
Calling Thomas Massey a grandstander that should be kicked out is bad Trump, right?
Hmm.
Because Thomas Massey's correct. You're asking him to sign another CR when 6 months ago they said, or not even 3 months ago, they said, give us time and we'll get a real budget done next time. We promise. No, 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 no. Now listen, sign this one and we promise by September we'll get a real budget. And we've
No,
been hearing this. The
no.
last time we had a balanced budget was under Barack Obama. The last
Yeah.
time they presented a legit, not a balance, a legitimate budget was Barack Obama.
Yeah.
And to
Yeah.
me, it's like, you can call it grandstanding all you want, but the Thomas Massey's and Thomas Massey. And I appreciate someone who's going to sit there and call out the bullshit. And it's like, no, what did you just? And the thing is, too, it's so omnibus, no one can ever fully read it. So we don't
Yeah.
know what type of pork's in there. We don't know what types of tarps in there. We're just sitting there having to trust mostly the uniparty to do the right thing. That's always makes me
Yeah.
go sideways a little bit.
No, I get that. I get that. And I could do this all day. I'm gonna have to run in just in a little bit here.
That's fine.
So I appreciate the
No, no, you tell me when you have to go. Like we could
no
talk
no
all day, and I don't want to keep you all night.
yeah I should probably in a couple minutes I should close out. I wonder. So I mean you are more like definitively bullish about the tariffs than I are, but it sounds like we're
That's
both
fine.
like having a good time
Yeah.
with Trump part two. Um, Do you think that we are going to win these? Do you think that the midterms are going to punish us the way they typically do, or do you think it's just all about whether Congress actually takes action? That's my question
It's
for you.
all about Congress.
Okay.
If Congress does their part, I actually think the CR does well for them because Trump asked for it.
Mm-hmm.
And I
Mm-hmm.
think his base is incredibly loyal for that. I don't think Massey's going anywhere. I think he's fine in Kentucky.
Yeah.
But I think that they're doing a decent job. They've gotten, like in Riley law, they got him trying to like they need to get some big laws. Like they need to really get a good border law that's gonna really solidify some of the things that Trump wants to do. Maybe get him fully funding to build the wall, right?
Yes.
Get that
That's
funding there. That would be a massive victory. And get some of the things they need to really look at his executive orders and really pick the things that they can win on
hmm
and be good publicity for them. If they have that, then I think they'll be okay. Um, I actually think we're okay in the Senate regardless. I think the
Mhm.
Senate's going to be okay. I think the House is big.
Yep.
The House is big, and the House needs victories, and that's where I see. So before you go, because I
Yes.
do appreciate you jumping on. I had a whole we went with the American Religious Revival and just went, and I love it. But I want to talk a little bit about your book because I
Sure.
want everyone to buy it, and then we'll quickly talk about your Substack. I want people to go there as well. So your
Appreciate
book
that.
that you wrote, Light of Mind, Light of the World, Illuminating Science Through Faith. Spencer, we're going to have you back on because I do want to talk a whole bunch. We could talk a whole bunch about science through faith, but
Sounds
I
great.
just want to give you the floor. What is the general premise of the book and why did you write it?
So, actually, I've already mentioned the central premise because I said that when I was a kid, I was a Reddit atheist, and all my buddies were. And so this is a book basically aimed at high school Spencer. This is for anybody that thinks in order to be smart, in order to be realist, he has to leave his big theological questions at the door. And I think a lot of people, this is their main barrier to like, okay, they can hear us talking about how morality comes from Judeo-Christian, whatever, but they still have this feeling, well, didn't this stuff get debunked and dispelled by science? Like, isn't science? And so the way that I answer that question in this book is to tell the whole history of science, beginning with the Greeks and the Chaldeans and the what was called natural philosophy at the time, and demonstrate that actually, in the grand sweep of history, materialism, the idea that science is all there is, or that the physical world is all there is, and we don't need to talk about God or we shouldn't talk about God, is a vanishingly rare and unusual position that is probably running out of steam. And in fact, when I began the book, I thought this is going to be an argument for why we should ditch materialism. Now it almost looks like it was an argument for uh, describing why we have ditched materialism and suggesting what we might put in its place. And so I end up marrying quantum physics with the book of Genesis, chapter 1. But
That's
to see
awesome.
how that happens, you are going to have to buy the book, which is
Yes.
on Amazon and Audible and everywhere books are sold.
100%. And then I want to share light to also your Substack, which is right here.
Mm-hmm.
You want to go to substack.com at Spencer Klavan. It's very simple.
Mm-hmm.
And you just go down here, and everyone should go subscribe to his Substack. I'm not signed in, so I'm not subscribing to anything, obviously. But you can go there, and I love the Be Root to Grok is hilarious. Just the title of it. But you'll get some great things. Obviously, there's Papa right there. You restack that
Uh-huh.
with Andrew Klavan there, and then obviously log in for more. But everyone should jump in and subscribe to the Substack because if you like what you heard here and you like hearing, Spencer and his theories, and obviously he is a incredibly well-read, intelligent man. He does his research. Stop that! Don't make faces. But he does. No, your face is gonna stay that way.
You must be
No,
talking about somebody else. I think
but
you've got me confused with another guest.
but yeah, I don't want to take up too much more of his time, so we'll let him get out of here. He is
Nicely
Spencer
done.
Klavan. To give real quick, got to give Nate his real quick shout. Downstream effect of Doge is future Republicans will run for Congress based on the findings of extreme waste and the need for Congress to take extreme action. That is very true, Nate. So that is also a good point.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's a good place to wrap it up. So, Spencer, thank you so much for coming on, man.
Alex, it's been a blast. Thank you, pal. And anytime.
I appreciate it. So once again, if you want to go find him also on X at Spencer Klavan, on Instagram at S Klavan, go support the Claremont Institute. And do you also do a podcast or anything like that?
Yes, I have a show called Young Heretics, and it's a weekly introduction to the great works of the West. So we're reading the Aeneid right now. And if you've
Ooh,
ever felt like classic literature is something you probably should get on, but you never had a cool based TA to like talk you through it in a way that was not cringe and not lame, I am that guy, and Young Heretics is your show.
that's awesome. So everyone should also go subscribe to Young Heretics because that sounds dope as hell. And everyone, I appreciate you for watching, listening, wherever you are. Go find us at the Alex Cuesta Show. Like, share, follow, subscribe. Do all your due diligence, and we'll be back next week. David should be there with me, and maybe I'll pop in for a random show this week. I don't know. But if I not, then I'll see you guys next week.